never know if it could change your life. Take a chance, you're neither wrong or right. You never know if you don't roll them dice. You better roll them dice. You never know if it could change your life.
Good morning, Matt.
Morning, Rob. Good to see you. How are you?
I'm
How's
doing
life?
well. I'm doing very well. Thank you for asking. Life is good. It's almost technically summer. I mean, it feels like summer, but it is going to be actual summer in a few days. The birds are chirping. The sun is out. It's nice. It's feels good.
Yeah. I was doing okay as well until a colleague at work asked me, what is quality? And I've been kind of spiraling since then.
Well, I was working on my motorcycle, Matt, and I was having sort of like an internal conversation with my insane alter ego Phaedrus, and I have a lot
Phaedrus.
of thoughts on quality. Okay, anyway, sorry to people who don't know what the fuck we're talking about. This is Dungeon Master of None.
I'm Dungeon Master Matt,
and I'm Dungeon Master Rob.
Yeah, and we're not weed dads. We're not motorcycle dads.
There's no Zen in the art of
Dragons
D&D today anyway.
No. Thankfully. But speaking of what is quality, playing any quality games. How are your games going? What's your game life like?
They're going well. I'm so glad you asked. So I have two games running currently. I have a Cyberpunk Red game with that is hybrid, and that's going pretty well. By the way, if anybody's wondering, I have one player who calls in.
Hybrid?
Yes.
Oh.
I have one.
Are they the hacker? Please tell me they're the hacker.
They are the hacker. Yes, they're the netrunner slash. I think they're like a netrunner slash solo. I like a solo with netrunner splash or something like that. Though we've.
I mean, that's so perfect, right?
Yeah.
If they're calling in, right? Oh, has the party ever met them in person? No. Will they ever? No. Do they? They could live in space, if they're a netrunner.
It's a lot of fun. I love Cyberpunk. It's definitely I'm finding that I'm having to grapple with the rules, but it's much just because they're so different from D&D. But once you get them, they're really pretty simple. Anyway, I'm loving my Cyberpunk game. It's a lot of fun.
So have you come around on the rules of Cyberpunk Red in that they're just different, they're not awful?
Yeah, no, I don't remember what I said.
I mean, you've always liked them. I've thought they're kind of.
You think they're awful? Here's the thing: they're better than Shadowrun. They're better than Shadowrun. They're okay. They're good once you get to know them. I think the main problem with Cyberpunk Red is that I don't like how the book is laid out. The more time I spend with it, the more I understand what Mike Pondsmith was trying to do. But I'm finding that I much prefer Paizo's textbook style. So I would say that Cyberpunk Red is more thematically organized. There's each chapter sort of has a focus. This is what life is like in Night City. This is Friday Night Firefight. Here's where all the combat rules are. That makes it sort of hard to navigate when you're looking for rules, but the more time I spend with the book, the more I get used to that. And the rules themselves.
I mean, that's the biggest tip for all rule books. You basically just have to memorize them.
Yeah, right.
No, it's not what they should be. Okay, that makes sense.
And as for the rules, I kind of agree with you. I don't love them, but my players really like them, and I'll tell you why. Because everything is just like a D10 plus whatever, unless it's like a damage roll, and then their damage die are on the sheet. So all they have to do is roll a D10, find the relevant skill, and add up the numbers. And these are people who never really came around to 5th edition. So I'm coming around on the Cyberpunk rules.
That's such an important point. I have in one of my groups, I realized I had skipped something in my initial spiel on rules and roles, and I was like, okay, wait, quick time out. Just a reminder, whenever you have to make a check in D&D 5e, it's always the big one. Because I was getting a lot of questions again. Do I roll for acrobatics, the big one? Yes.
Yeah, the big one.
And I'd move on. And that happened 3 times. I'm like, wait a second. Hey, everyone, always the big one here. Okay.
Always the big one,
now we're good. Always the big
one. My other game...
We're still in session 5, so it's fine.
My other game, I was a participant. I had which was nice. It's nice to be a player. And we just wrapped up a sort of like a big arc. It was Savage Worlds, and my GM did something really cool. I might actually have to bring him on to talk about it, and I don't want to spoil it because it's too complicated. But he did something very like big brain meta that I didn't think was going to work, but actually ended up being kind of awesome. So I'll put a pin in that. The
big brain meta things are like really hard to pull off.
They really are. And
kudos.
I did not think it was going to work, but I was like, actually, this is pretty great. The upshot of that is that I think I talked myself into running Invisible Sun for this group, which you and I have read but not talked about yet.
Yeah, we haven't talked about it.
Speaking of big brain,
that was like one of the first Kickstarters I backed. Only at the digital level. I didn't get the like $500 cube.
I know it was so expensive.
I kind of wish I did.
But I know I'm kind of wish I'd gotten the cube now. But I have to like reread that and get used to it. But we'll talk about that soon because it's really cool. Anyway, so my games have been languishing for a long time, but the past few months I've actually managed to get some things going, which is really nice. It's been difficult even, after the pandemic, to get things back on their feet. So I'm feeling good. How about you, Matt?
Yeah. Games are good. I got a regular 5e game, running one shots for another group starting, and I'm always of like mixed feelings about this. So I'm starting a Star Trek adventures game. And I think maybe one day we have to do a whole episode on licensed RPGs because, there's just something I say to a couple people, some people who I haven't been able to get to play Dungeons & Dragons. Do you want to play a Star Trek RPG? And they're like, yes, I'm in immediately. I will be wearing my Enterprise TNG uniform. Yeah.
This happened to me with the Firefly RPG. I had a bunch of players who had no interest in the game that I was running, but the moment that I said, I just showed them the Firefly book, and they were like, yes, I'm in, let's play. And we'll have to do a whole episode on licensed RPGs because it's a thing.
Yeah, it's such a mixed bag in that sometimes you're getting like really quality things in some aspects of the TTRPG and like really slipshod stuff in the other. And I mean, there's just a ton of variability. You and I both love the Dark Souls 5e adaptation.
Imagine the "you died" screen here. I'm gonna plug in this sound.
Yeah.
No, it sucks. Well, that's a good point because like they vary dramatically in quality, right? Like some of them are good, or I'll say that. Like the Fantasy Flight's licensed Star Wars RPG is good. Like that's kind of different from, I don't know. It's really hard to draw the line between like, is this a lazy cash grab like the Dark Souls one, and is this like a genuine, like we put effort into this, like like the Fantasy Flight games. But yeah, it's a problem because like unless you're a very sophisticated consumer of TTRPGs, it can be hard to tell, right? And if you don't know what you're looking for, like I can easily imagine somebody walking into their friendly local gaming store, seeing Avatar in a nice shiny book and just grabbing it and buying it without knowing that it's powered by the apocalypse and that, it's not, especially if they're only familiar with D&D. I don't know how common that is, but unless you know what you're doing, that could be like a real, it could be a real problem, put people off.
One of the disappointing things, like, for example, with the Star Wars license is like licensors are fickle. Like,
yes.
Disney changes, one exec 3 rungs up the corporate ladder changes their ideas. They're like, actually, everything's in-house. We don't care about RPGs. It only made us $2 million. So, like, what does it matter? And then the whole cycle of the Edge of the Empire, Force and Destiny, it never gets to the end,
And this happens all the time. There are tons of, scattered wastelands full of RPGs that just lost their licenses and now, they're unsupported or you have to, which is
truly sad.
Yeah. Still, I'm excited to see how that goes. We have not talked about Star Trek much on this show, which is too bad because I am a fan, not as much as I am of Star Wars, but there's a lot of value in Star Trek. I think. Sorry, this is a tangent, but like,
sure.
The only thing that I have issue with, I guess, when it comes to Star Trek and RPGs, is that it's a very, very specific type of story with a focal point, who is the captain, and that's cool. I love that, but it feels very hard to like tell a Star Trek story, and if you're and unlike other universes, I don't think it really makes a lot of sense to tell a not captain on a ship story in Star Trek. Maybe that's a me opinion, but that feels weird to me.
I think the who is the captain thing is a little kind of up in the air, but the captain, isn't better at anything, right?
Right.
And I think if you take a Picard or like the way most role-playing parties work, where we make decisions by consensus,
yes.
which is how things usually work out. It doesn't really end up being a problem, and things like captain, science officers, ship's therapist, like these roles are just narrative fluff as opposed to who is the focal point of the story, because it shifts every scene and every episode.
That's true. And if people come to the table and they like Star Trek and they know Star Trek and everybody's on board with I'm security officer, I'm chief engineer, whatever, or something like that, then I can totally see it working.
Yeah. I've also been getting into shift topics, my 3D printer, and we've talked a lot about how both of our default styles are just like theater of the mind for most things. Pull out a blank battle mat and quickly write where characters are if we need to keep track of it. But one of my players painted beautiful minis for everyone in the game, and so I felt like I needed to participate in the arms race, and so I've had some success putting some like cool monster things, terrain out there that I've 3D printed and painted. But the first time I got the ooh and ah was when I had a 3D printed painted bookshelf, and a player reaches out to grab a book, and I replaced it with a 3D printed painted mimic bookshelf, and they were like, "Oh shit!"
Which gnarly as hell. It's really cool. Yeah.
Anyway, so great way to waste time and money 3D printing, but I did get 1 minute of people going ooh, and so depends on how much that's worth to you.
We gripe a lot. Well, I gripe a lot about the current state of technology and how everything sucks. 3D printers are cool. 3D printers are a genuinely awesome thing that exists, and it's so neat that you can just download a mold and print out your mini or a part that you need. It's very cool. I do not have space for one yet, but it is on my short list of things to get as I age into middle age and need additional things to
right. If you're thinking about getting this for your D&D game, so you can print minis for your players or terrain or like a cool set piece once in a while, just keep in mind it's essentially a hobby, and at the end of the day, this isn't going to save you money or anything, because it takes time and effort. But if you enjoy like, ooh, can I make this work? Then it's a lot of fun. The crazy thing about it is it's essentially a phone screen under a thing on a vat of toxic resin that cures under UV light, and the only mechanical bit is a plate that raises up in the air, and you're like, huh, okay, that's crazy how that works.
It is crazy. Matt's right. Only get it if it sounds fun, because it's not really a time saver, and really probably not a money saver unless you do a lot of this. But if it sounds fun, check it out. Ooh, Matt's showing me another thing. It's
a Star Trek ship. Can you identify the class, Rob?
No, I can't.
That's a Nova class science vessel.
Thank you very much. I was going to try,
like
and
the
I was
Excelsior from
no,
Voyager.
I'm definitely going to get it wrong.
There's also, if we wanted to check in with our favorite company in the business, there's been some things going on.
It's Wizards of the Coast. We have not talked. We talked a lot about Wizards related things at the beginning of the year, including the OGL and related issues, and we have not recently, and that is because I'm tired. I'm tired, boss. And I don't want to do it anymore. But there have been some updates that I do think we should probably address in brief. Mostly, it seems like, how do I describe this? It seems like they have pivoted or changed their messaging on what 1D&D is.
Yeah, it's very, very strange in that. So I think they've always said we're not calling it a new edition, but everyone's just sort of like, yeah, whatever, it's going to be new. And then I feel like either someone higher up or the surveys themselves got a lot of feedback that were like, people are unhappy that the new edition is not 100% backwards compatible, which you and I have talked about before. Like, that's impossible. If you change one thing, then it's not 100%. And we had always assumed, okay, yeah, basically the player-facing stuff, like 90% of that's not going to work anymore. Adventures and stuff, nothing we've seen change means you can't run 5e Curse of Strahd or Ghost of Saltmarsh or, Horde of the Dragon Queen or whatever.
That should all theoretically work without too much adjustment. But yeah, a lot of player-facing stuff is going. Yeah. We always assumed that how it would be. Yeah.
The news this week was that, Wizards is saying, actually, we're walking back a lot of the changes that we've made, and we never got a chance to talk about the, playtest packet 5 with the new weapon abilities and stuff. And I was like, okay, yeah, that looks fine, whatever. We were just too tired, I think,
a lot of it
of Wizards of the Coast to talk about it.
A lot of it felt borrowed from Pathfinder 2E, which is not a complaint. That's good. I like the way that they've done weapons in that. So that was I did like the changes that I saw in that playtest. But generally, though, there wasn't, I don't know, I didn't feel like there was a full episode of stuff to talk about. And yes, we were tired. But yeah, now they're saying, I don't know.
So here they're saying two things: that the 5th edition core rulebooks will just be called the 2024 5th edition core rulebooks, that they will quote prepare the game for its next decade, and that they will be no longer standardizing level advancements in subclasses across classes, so you no longer get your subclass at every level, but except for the first one, which is all being moved to 3rd. And to me, that seems like the worst of all possible worlds. And the monk playtest has been delayed. So that's all that was in there.
Yeah, so it is unclear what's going to actually happen. But I guess reading between the lines, it seems like Wizards wants to move to sort of like yearly releases of the core rulebooks and or something like this. And it's not unusual for a company to re-release their core rulebooks with mostly organizational and editorial changes. Savage Worlds is doing this. Pathfinder is doing this. You can argue whether or not that's valuable. Sometimes it is. Sometimes they have learned a lot, and the updated versions are much easier to read and have errata and all that. I have not seen anything from Wizards that indicates that these 2024 editions are going to be worth spending another 150, 100. Oh no, sorry, they're more expensive now. It's going to be $210 to get all 3, right? They're $70 each.
I think that's correct. Yeah.
Which is fucking insane. Sorry to. I don't know. I don't even have the energy to be cynical anymore. I'm not sure what they're doing, because this sucks, and I don't really get what the. I don't really know what's happening here, to be honest. It's very bizarre.
It seems like a weird reaction, maybe not from the designers, but from someone higher up, because if you're going to make a new edition, or here, let me see if this clarifies it. Quote, we are releasing new editions of the books, Crawford emphasized. This is from the Polygon article. We are not releasing a new edition of the game. And so that, I think, is a really important distinction, that this is still 5th edition, but yes, we're releasing revised versions of the books, which anywhere else in the publishing world would be called new editions. So does that clarify things, Rob?
It does not. And I guess like what's not
It's not a new edition of the game, it's a new edition of the books, which you use to play the game.
Well, and this does not answer the question of, are any of those changes that are in any of the playtests going to be in the new books? If so, that's a new edition, right? Like those are still not really backwards compatible, right? Like you can shoehorn them in, I guess, but like there's enough changes that like can't, like, are those all just thrown out? I
also don't get the obsession with backwards compatibility. Maybe it's because I'm like doing things like running bits of Pathfinder modules in a 5th edition game, and I just convert things on the fly basically at this point. It doesn't really matter to me. But I don't know. The only things that are changing is like player facing stuff. Do you really care that you can't have the subclass of the Dominion of the Order of the Grave or whatever for your people? I guess people care about that. I don't know. It's super confusing, and it seems like the worst of all possible worlds.
It really does.
They're releasing a new edition, but then a lot of the things that suck about the classes and how the game works are not getting fixed, right?
Yeah, that's what's bewildering, is they're releasing new books, but it's not clear at all what you are going to get if you buy those new books. Like that's just totally. Like I guess we'll have to wait and see, but you know, this is again the sort of contrast with Pathfinder. You can buy the PDF versions of their books, you can buy the pocket versions, right? But there is only one option for Wizards of the Coast, and that is you buy their $70 book, and that's it. And I just nothing. It would already be a very difficult sell for me. And I have not seen anything to indicate that there's a reason to do that. I guess we'll have to see what's in it when it comes out. But this is just bizarre. I don't know what's going on over there.
I mean, you and I, like, just to drill on one specific example for this, you and I's favorite thing was the like subclass standardization.
Yeah.
Among the things they're like, oh, that's so cool. You know, we fun people like us could even like imagine letting players take a subclass from one class in another. Like, who cares?
Yeah.
Like, just let them do it. Oh, this is great. I love not having to at my table when some people level up to level 2 and some people level up to 3. They have to make an important decision. Everyone has to make the important decision now.
Yeah,
this is great, and that's the one thing that's going away. It's like,
right. Like, are they still going to like lump all the classes into like expert, warrior, priest, whatever, or is that gone too? Like, that was mostly like a organizational change, but like I just have nothing useful to say because this is just so confusing.
We're also like, if these are supposed to come out in 2024, like they got to be ready pretty soon,
right? They have to probably.
It seems like
going
they were
to the
on
printer
pace
in the next 6
to
months.
have a good play test for like the first 2 months, and then like other things started happening, mainly the OGL. It seemed like the pace of the playtest materials dropped off. I'm like, oh yeah, they're not keeping up. They're not gonna. We still haven't seen the I guess the monk class or any DMG or monster manual rules in a playtest packet. So things are not looking good for. I guess it's not 1D&D. I guess it's definitely not 5.5, but the 2024 5th edition Player's Handbook. So that's the news update.
That's the news. we are going to delve into a simpler time. We're going to look to the wisdom of the ancients, and do a little D&D Dragon Magazine reading series. And I have here Dragon Magazine number 74. And Matt, you can see there's a guy being yanked around by his flail by a green dragon, and nice. Some hapless adventurers, a classic. And
Andy and I were talking about this. We were talking about Shadow Dark, but I do love the old school vibe where there is art of adventurers just getting their shit handed to them and them getting fucked up. Like speaking of 5th edition, there's not a lot of art of people just getting wrecked by like monsters or traps or environmental things. I miss that.
I agreed with that point. I want to see your adventurers having a bad time. Show me them like, about to get like ruined by a beholder or a dragon or something like that. That's what we want to see.
Now, Rob, this is very exciting for us because normally our reading series have come from Dungeon Magazine, and this one's from Dragon. So I'm very excited to poke into this.
This is exciting. Yeah, and so this is again number 74. Which came out in June of 1983. So this magazine is older than you and I. And I have a very special... by the way, I was flipping through these, and they really let Ed Greenwood run wild, or made him, because a lot of the articles in these sort of like early 80s Dragon magazines are Greenwood related. The one we read last time was Greenwood, and they're good, but like he's putting a lot of words out there about D&D. But this one is entitled, Matt, The Vicarious Participator by Louis Pulsifer.
Pulsifer?
Louis Pulsifer.
Okay.
And the subtitle is Take the Middle Ground in Role-Playing Style. I'm just going to begin reading from this article by Louis Pulsifer, and I'm interested in your thoughts.
Okay, so a role-playing centrist. I have no idea what that could mean, but I'm excited to find out.
This is the third way of role-playing. In the early days of fantasy role-playing, FRP, gaming, many players did not role-play in any significant sense of the word. That is, they did not pretend or imagine that they were in a real world different from our own. Instead, they made a farce from our own. They made a farce out of FRP, and their characters tended to act like thugs or gangsters, if not fools. Pursuit of power, without regard for anything else, was typical.
Huh. Okay. So I am sure this is true for Louis Parsifal's game, or whatever, or for most people who worked at Wizards of the Coast. But I think a lot of people are uncovering, like, okay, maybe not for D&D, but for these other weird role-playing game adjacents for this fantasy game of diplomacy that people were playing. Like, people were doing some serious role-playing in basically every other gaming space.
And we talked about, Matt and I talked about this offline, and we'll address it in an episode. But there's a lot of evidence for pre-chainmail, like actual role-playing happening at like fantasy conventions or gaming conventions in games that are not D&D, which is interesting, but we'll leave that aside. Louis Pulsifer was almost certainly playing, with a certain type of person. We'll hear all about. Yeah. In reaction and rebuttal to this, some players went to the other extreme. They believe that characters, through their players, should imagine themselves as fulfilling a role in the real world, and further declared that each character should be a personality completely separate from the player, so that the player becomes more of an actor than a participant in the game. For several years, these people were voices crying out in the wilderness, but as more people gained FRP experience or heard about this improvisational theater, this is in quotes, or, quote, persona creator, remember this term because he's going to use it a lot, school of role-playing, And as the more articulate and vociferous of the persona extremists found an audience for their views, this extreme attitude about role-playing has spread so widely that it, instead of not role-playing at all, seems to have become the standard.
Okay, so he is worried that people who are the theater kids are taking over his game.
That's right.
Okay.
He's now the pendulum has swung too far. And we really need a reasonable middle option, Matt,
Wow.
So here's that.
Now, I will say, I don't want to get in the way of his arguments too much, but I will say I personally have never been able to fully, and I don't think anyone can fully separate player and character, and no one should try to, because that seems like just too much effort. So
I agree, and I think that Pulsifer in his own way would as well. Unfortunately, because initially they had to express their views about role-playing with maximum emphasis just to be listened to, many of the people in this second group have become intolerant of other views. Sorry. One occasionally runs into remarks at conventions or in articles which disparage anyone who does not create an elaborate persona for each of his characters, each different from his own personality. The most hardline advocates of this school of thought refuse to believe that there is any other proper way to play, and they measure the skill of a role-playing gamer in accordance with how closely he or she meets their notions of role-playing as theater.
Uh-oh.
There is a third group with an attitude that lies between the power-mad, thug character players on one hand and the persona creators on the other. The viewpoint of these people, who may be called vicarious participants, reflects the original intent of role-playing gaming. They, and I number myself among them.
Is the Bork hearing from the 80s influencing this? Our first original intent of the Constitution?
I don't know. I do love the originalist argument when it comes to power gaming versus role-playing. This is terrific. They, and I number myself among them, believe that the point of a role-playing game is to put oneself into a situation one could never experience in the real world, and to react as the player would like to think he would react in similar circumstances. In other words, the game lets me do the thing I'd like to think I would do if I were a wizard, or if I were a fighter, or perhaps even if I decided to take the evil path. Consequently, it would be foolish for me to create a personality quite different from my own, because it would no longer be me.
Okay. Wait, so he's saying that the middle path is to create characters, but make them very similar to yourself?
I think that's precisely his argument.
I was hoping he was I was like, oh man, maybe I'm going to end up agreeing with some of what this guy was saying. I was hoping he was going to say, yeah, you should create fun and interesting characters and realize that, you're also still playing a game and you're going to learn skills as a player in that game. And even if your character is happy-go-lucky, you're not always going to touch the poison needle or, trigger the trap, just because you'll learn a few things and not do that just for the sake of everyone and yourself. Okay, no, it's just saying just only play yourself.
Yeah.
That seems like the worst middle ground.
I'm afraid that what you're describing is a level of self-awareness and sophistication that Mr. Louis Pulsifer was unable to reach in this particular article. The game is not a matter of.
Well, let's talk about this for just a second, Rob. I like it when players
let me get through the rest of this paragraph, and then then we'll discuss
get to a good stopping spot. Sorry.
This game is not a matter of Sir Stalwart does so and so, but I do so and so. In my imagination, I am the one who might get killed, not some paper construct, however elaborate it may be. Of course. Try not to laugh until I'm done with the sentence. Of course, because these are games played by people with adult mentality, even if not of adult age, no one ever becomes over-involved emotionally.
Okay.
If this were coming from anyone else, I would think that was hilarious dry humor. But I am convinced that this is said with a complete straight face. So right. Matt, sorry. Now that
he has never felt sad when a character died. Okay, sure.
Yeah.
I
So
guess I
say?
believe you, Lewis.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think it works great when players play a character that like fits their type, right? If they're like a very outgoing personality, they play a face character, they love that. But like, I mean, I think it's just as good when people play against type. It usually works well. Sometimes they kind of it cannot work. Like, oh, I play a shy weirdo, but I'm an outgoing person, and they just end up being an outgoing character. And guess what? That's for me. That's fine. I'm like, actually, we discover this person is not a shy weirdo. This character is outgoing. That's fine. You ended up not doing something different from yourself. That's okay. Yeah, I just sort of think both are fine.
Both are fine. It's true that it's hard to play something that is distinctly different from yourself. I often try to, and I end up sort of like drifting back toward, a modified version. But that's because acting is hard, and it's something that I continue to work on, and it's fun to try, even if I don't succeed. I don't deliberately set out to create, muscled wizard Rob or cyberpunk solo Rob or something like that. But sometimes that happens.
Yeah.
But I do not think that you should, I guess, unless this is your first time role playing, do that deliberately. I think it's fun and interesting to challenge yourself and try to create an interesting character.
For me, it's always take the loosest approach possible. Like especially if it's your first time role playing, like just create a character. I don't really care what it is. We'll find out who or what they are as you play, because you've never done this before.
Right.
So this character may end up being a persona you inhabit. It may just being your attitudes but you're also an elf. Both are fine. Let's figure out what you want to do first. Don't put too much effort into it, because you're just trying this out. Yeah.
Notice also that I didn't say
original. I'm still hung up on original intent of the like. It's I think we've moved past this, but it's like, oh man, if this trend continued now that like Gygax and Arneson and everyone's dead, what if what if no other game took off and people are just like parsing these words trying to figure out what the founders intended for us.
Oh my god, what a nightmare. Notice also that I didn't say as I would act, but as I would like to think I would act. Few FRP gamers are made of the stuff of heroes, but we like to think we are when we play the game.
Damn.
I know, this is ruthless from Pulsifer.
We all know that in reality, people who play Dungeons and Dragons are just cowardly, snivelly, like wallflowers that suck. They're little worms.
The game allows us to live out our fantasies about being heroic or saintly or evil, although we in our personal lives will never reach nor probably aspire to any of these extremes. I don't know. I aspire to be mildly heroic at some point. Sure. I don't know. There are modest versions of that. But whatever. As one player put it, if he were actually in a dungeon, he'd be scared silly and would flee in utter panic. But his character does not, because the character can have attributes, courage in this case, which the player does not have. The difference between this view and the persona creator's view is fairly clear-cut, though it would be hard to define a line dividing one style from the other. The Vicarious Participator lives an adventurer through his character, which tends to be a lot like he is himself. But he accepts that his character must undergo some changes in attributes and personality from the players, whether these changes are imposed by the player himself, by the game rules, or by the nature of the referee's world, to help him enjoy events he could never experience in the real world. For example, he will accept the requirements of an extremely good alignment and the crusading zeal of a paladin, or the requirements of a character who is evil, or even a character of the opposite sex. Imagine. To him, The question is, what would I like to do if I were such and such in a fantasy world?
Wow, this is an incredibly like complicated like mental jujitsu you have to do anytime you do an action to play a role-playing game.
Yeah,
instead of just being like, I'm playing a character, what would I like to do if I had been transformed into this? which is, I mean, that is way more complicated than, I'm an elf sorcerer.
Yeah.
Damn.
I mean, again, acting is hard, but this sounds substantially more difficult than what would Sir Stalwart do? Like, I'd like that seems so much easier to answer and roleplay than what would I, if I were in the shoes of a paladin named Sir Stalwart in a fantasy game, do? Like this, I thought I
don't know anything about
this argument when I started reading this, and then the more that I read, I was like, what are you even talking about, man? This doesn't make any sense.
Rob, I never made it past like high school theater, so I don't know anything about like acting craft things.
You don't have to.
But no one does, like Marlon Brando when he played I don't know, the Kurtz or whatever in Apocalypse Now. He didn't say, if I had been transformed into Kurtz, this is what I would. Though actually, for Marlon Brando, maybe that would work. I don't know. But I don't think anyone does this, right? They don't say.
No, I don't think so either.
If I have become this, they just say, "Oh, I am this person."
I mean, I did make it a little bit further than you did, and I'm not like a dramaturge, but I have taken some acting classes and read some, theory or whatever, and you can be a method actor where you literally like inhabit, become that person, which I think is weird. And by the way, a lot of method actors are weird, bonkers assholes. Or you can just be, imagine all the different Jokers, right? You've got your Heath Ledger Joker and your Jack Nicholson Joker, and they're like, I am playing the Joker, and this is my interpretation of this character, right? These are ordinary approaches to acting, right? You are given a script or a situation, and you act. Neither of those situations is I, Jack Nicholson. What would I do if I were the Joker in this fantasy Batman world? This is just, I don't even know how you would approach this, to be honest. This appears to be Pulsifer's very own specific approach to acting that I don't know that anybody else could ever execute. But let us continue, because he has some more spicy things to say about people who do not do this. The persona creator, on the other hand, places himself at a distance from his character, regarding it as a separate entity, almost with a life of its own. He is not interested in what he would do, but in what a creature of such and such race, intelligence, likes, dislikes, etc. would do in a given situation. If his character dies, his reaction is not overly emotional, though he'll certainly regret the loss of all the work he put into the character. The difference between the two styles is manifested in many small ways. For example, a persona creator playing a character of low intelligence will play dumb. If he has a good idea, he probably won't mention it to the other players, since his character wouldn't have thought of it. A participator, on the other hand, doesn't always care what his character's numbers happen to be. It's really him in there anyway, and he'll use his own brain and other faculties to the fullest to keep his character alive and accomplish his goals.
All right. So, I mean, I think he's, arguing against a straw man, of the worst idea of a someone who's playing their character seriously. But I mean, this does bring up an interesting topic that I think is useful for helping with your players, right? Okay, right? There's players, there's characters. If the player has an idea that you think your character wouldn't come up with, I disagree with someone who would say, well, yeah, my character, or I had an idea, but I don't think my character would have that, so I never shared it with the party. I think it's usually good. More ideas that can be shared with the party are better. So just share it in a way your character would share it. Share it out of character. Honestly, I don't
share it out of character, or even like a dumb PC can have like a moment of brilliance, like an idiot savant moment, like role play that.
Or that's just a fun opportunity to share something. Think of movies. It's like. You're Fry. I'm having one of those headaches with pictures. An idea? Right. Yes. There you go. You even use that line. Yeah. And everyone will get a laugh, and you share your idea, and then you move the fuck on.
Right. Exactly. You don't have to. Again, this is an opportunity to do something fun, to role play something interesting. Like, yeah, there are moments where your character really would not do something, and so it doesn't make sense. But like, this is exactly the problem with people who sit down and they're like, I'm a Kender thief, and so I'm gonna steal everything from my fellow PCs, and that's annoying, and no one likes that, and it's a pain in the ass at the table. So even though maybe that's what your character would do, you don't have to do that. You come up with a good reason why your thief is in a party and isn't just stealing their shit all the time. Like, that's, I don't know, like perhaps that's a form of vicarious participation, but I do think this guy is strawmanning the hardcore role players, because a good one will not do that, because you don't have to. It doesn't make sense.
I think the only difference, like, most of the time, parties need more ideas on what to do or do, and for me, the fun is often watching my players, partially in character, partially out of character, discuss what's going on and what they should do. And I think the exception to this would be, let's say you have a character that has a specific goal. Like, this character loves the androids that are not recognized by others as fully human, and they do have an idea, but it would hurt the android faction, so they don't bring it up. Perfect, right?
Yes.
Your character has a goal, try and work towards that goal and keep those things in mind. But when the party's struggling for an idea as to how to overcome a challenge, which is what I think they're talking about,
right,
you make sure you share that idea.
Yeah. The difference can be generalized to show the attitudes of the two types of role players to the aspect of luck in character creation. This is the difference between vicarious participators and persona creators. For reference, the persona creators are not much concerned with being able to choose aspects of the personality of their character. In a sense, they try to be like the most versatile film and stage actors who can play any role well. Consequently, they would not mind, and might even prefer, playing a game like Chivalry and Sorcery, in which virtually everything about a character, alignment, race, even horoscope, is determined by dice rolls. On the other hand, vicarious participators want to have some choice in the role they play. They prefer an activity such as the Dungeons and Dragons registered trademark game, in which only the ability scores are determined by chance, while race, alignment, social status, and so on are largely matters of choice.
You're not helping your argument by saying my type of role player can play less games than yours.
The participators resemble film or stage actors who have specialized in a type of role. In this case, they specialize in being some variant of their idealization of themselves. So you should want to be a worse actor. You should try to be somebody who is typecast and likes being typecast. This is, again, like, I frankly don't get it. Why? Yeah. What's the argument here, Pulsifer? As stated before, one cannot draw a definite line between the two styles. As participants play more characters in different situations, they begin to approach the persona creators in effect. They play many different roles, increasingly different from their original notion. Many persona creators, on the other hand, do not care to play a persona they have not created themselves. That is, they put much of themselves into the character. There is still a fundamental difference in attitude, however, between I am doing it and this character is doing it. Persona creators, even of this limited sort, have been known to write stories about their characters and develop plot lines which do not arise from any game or any referee's actions. Participators would never bother with this.
We would never commit the sacrilege of writing a backstory for our character.
Never.
Or suggesting something for the dungeon master.
Yes. How does the vicarious player differ from the power/thug gamer? Again, there is no sharp dividing line between them. In some cases, the power/thug players are simply indulging in infantile fantasies. They haven't matured yet. Or they don't bring their maturity to their gaming sessions. Vicarious players realize that in this and every world there must be limitations on what a person can do. But those limitations are different in the game than they are in real life. For example, I have never met a participator who could believe in or tolerate a situation in which mortal characters defeat gods. Yet, such scenarios occur frequently in power games. The power/thug players are quite content to ignore all limitations on their characters, and they find referees who allow or encourage them to act in this manner. Some role players sneer at this attitude, but many people enjoy playing this way. However, while persona creators and vicarious players can coexist in a campaign, provided they are aware of their differences, neither type can practically coexist with the thugs.
The more I hear from this author, the more I think that this is a dungeon master, a game master who's been frustrated with various types of players, and they wish that everyone approached the game just like they did as a dungeon master, as a impartial referee, and so you should approach your characters as if you're kind of this impartial referee slightly inhabiting your character, and that's it. Which, you're not going to have many people who want to show up to your game.
Right.
By your own admission, you're cutting out 2/3 or so of the potential audience. Maybe you should run the game in a way and have opinions in a way where you can get as many people as possible at your table.
Right. This approaches some future, gamist, narrativist, simulationist arguments, but they're very nascent, and I feel bad. I have no idea who this guy is, and I don't want to dunk on him too hard, but mostly he seems irritated, and his argument doesn't actually make any sense. He continues to assign things to persona creators that he says only vicarious participators do, and vice versa. And I'm not really clear on the actual differences aside from his perceived differences. But this is the state of the discourse in 1982. The most important point I want to make is that there is nothing superior about the persona creation method of role-playing. Vicarious participation is neither less mature, nor less intelligent, nor less true blue than persona creation, though all these claims have been made at times. Persona creators should accept that many players simply do not want to become actors. Refereeing requires quite enough acting for most of us, for the referee must separate himself completely from his own non-player characters, or he cannot be objective and impartial. He must be a persona creator in order to be a good referee. Matt, this supports your assertion that this is a DM who is annoyed by
yes.
all the players that he has to deal with.
Yeah.
Perhaps this is the clearest indication that persona creation is no better than vicarious participation. Many excellent referees who are necessarily excellent persona creators nonetheless prefer vicarious participation when they play. The vicarious style is a matter of choice, not an inability to act.
Wow.
This is
why we need forums, Rob. This is why we need forums.
Yes.
So these people can go off and have their arguments, and we don't have to read them.
This is a very early example of making up a guy to get mad at. I mean, I'm sure that these guys do exist, but it feels like when somebody goes online and is complaining about, white non-binary bisexuals are always doing whatever, and gets 10,000 retweets and everybody's mad, and I'm like, are you angry at your roommate? Because that's what it sounds like,
Yeah.
Because I feel like this is addressed to a very specific subset of people, and not particularly broadly. Yeah, I don't know that the
right. Lewis is mad at one person in Madison, Wisconsin, who told him that actually people who inhabit their characters and create personas are superior.
Yes, and that's what he's mad about. Again, I thought it was interesting because it sort of approaches some elements of future arguments. There's power gaming versus role playing, and which is sort of like the ongoing argument, the axis on which is not actually, which by the way are not, as we have discussed before, not actually in conflict, but many players perceive them to be. But
Mm-hmm.
it really goes off the rails. I thought this was just a really fascinating, if not particularly useful insight into what was going on in the role playing space in 1982.
Well, I mean, to bring it back to some useful game mastering advice, when you first set up this argument, the author set up kind of a spectrum between people who are fully players and their character is just stats, versus people who, at the table are fully their characters and, have no player brain to think of, I'm at a table, I'm playing with other people. And I thought the middle ground would be you got to recognize you're both a player and a character, right? You can't make a character that, as Rob, you gave the example, is just going to steal from everyone all the time. That's not fun because as a player, that's not helping. And neither should you make a character that is so reckless or something. It just always makes a suboptimal choice. You should not ignore your own ability to get better at whatever role-playing game you're playing. And I thought the middle ground would be like, oh, just recognize you're both a player and a character at the same time. And you probably don't need to think more about it than that.
Well, right, and his initial point is valid, right? You're this is not actually an improv show. You are not there necessarily to just play your character. You were there to play a game, and that requires that you don't always do exactly what your character might do. But like we discussed, what he suggests is so much harder than just saying, what would my character do? And if that happens to be something that is like super like disruptive and bad for the game, then maybe go a step further and think about how they might do it in a way that's more constructive. But that's again, that's still so much easier than what would I, in this character in a different world, want to do. Like it's bewildering that this is the conclusion that he came to.
It's very it's very strange and difficult to even think about. But I think, yeah, when you're sitting down with your players, most people I think are not getting to this level, and it's useful to just ask them to think about just a couple broad personality traits. Yeah, and usually that's good enough. It's good enough, right? We all need a nice couple broad personality traits.
There's also, reading between the lines, you can kind of see how much of nerd culture is driven by resentment and feelings of being marginalized in one way or another. Like all of these actor types feel like they had to defend themselves against the power gamers, and now they've become so like extreme and vociferous in their defense of their type of play that they have now made Louis Pulsifer feel like he has to attack them. and you can see this happen today. Dedicated 5e or D20 players will get all like bent out of shape when someone says play a different game, and play a different game people will get like bent out of shape when they see like D&D players saying no, I like D&D. And
right, I think the craziest arguments where people assign the most extreme,
yes.
Oh, you tell me to play a different game? Actually, what about the person who already bought Dungeons and Dragons but also can never buy another game because they can't afford it? I was like, well, I wasn't saying that.
It's again, I don't want to say there's nothing there, but people get so like in their own heads about this, and this is just like such a core part of being a nerd, and I it's so frustrating because people will feel like their game or their hobby or whatever was like disrespected or marginalized at one point, and they'll never get over it, and this drives so much of the conversation to this day. So I guess I want to say, don't do that. It's fine.
Yeah.
It's never been more acceptable to like be a nerd, and there's little like nothing really that's too nerdy. You can LARP, you can be a fan fiction person. Like these were things that even like other nerds made fun of 20 years ago. That doesn't exist anymore. There's nothing that's too nerdy. Like it's never been a better time to find your people.
The acceptance is largely there of nerd subcultures, and the amount of people participating in them has risen dramatically, but the aggrieved mentality
has not gone
kind
away.
Of stuck around.
Yeah,
the worst of both possible worlds.
It really is, and the problem is that now there's so many more subcultures. They all get to be aggrieved at each other in various ways, it creates sometimes a truly poisonous discourse. Anyway,
right.
Just some
try
some
not
thoughts.
to get nerd aggrieved,
yes.
Right? About things that only matter inside the nerd thing, right?
Yes.
Real world things, get plenty mad about that.
Yes.
Sure.
Get mad, but don't make up a guy to get mad at, because you don't have to.
Well, thanks for taking me down that trip. Yes.
I always appreciate you letting me delve into the archives because there's always something to learn in there.
This brings me to, I think I have an idea for a sequel to this episode. If you have thoughts on this topic, please write us at dmofnone@gmail.com. The topic is the term metagaming.
Ooh, yeah. That's good. That's good. Actually, we should talk about that. Yeah, this came up recently. Let's talk metagaming. Write us, add us on Twitter. If you're on our Patreon, send us a message. Let us know what you think about metagaming. Give us your thoughts.
Yeah, I won't say anything because I don't want to poison the well before it comes in. So muddy the waters. We did one of these
on railroading, and the diversity of opinions on that was really fascinating, and there was a lot to talk about. So yeah. Tell us what you think about metagaming.
All right, and thanks again for listening.
That's right. Write us, talk to us, keep listening, rate, review, all that good stuff, and whatever you do, keep rolling them dice.